Welcome to the Aging Grace podcast. My name is Andrew Blake, your host, and today we've got something a little extra special for you. We've got Andy DeSantis, a close friend of mine, who has been taking the nutrition and diet scene and turning it upside down. He is a dietitian who not only has been featured in places such as Fashion and the Dietitian Connection, CTV's talk show, The Social. He's also an 11-time author, 11, with cookbooks focusing on topics ranging from type 2 diabetes to fatty liver disease. He's going to speak with us today about things such as how you can optimize your nutrition to help you promote healthy joints, how you can decrease the likelihood of cognitive decline later in life by including certain foods into your diet today. And he's also going to give his opinion on how social media has made it more confusing than ever for people just like you to know what to eat and when. All of this and more on today's episode of The Aging Grace. So today we've got Andy DeSantis here on the Aging Grace podcast, where he is a 11-time author, which he's covered books such as fatty liver disease. He's done type 2 diabetes. He's done all sorts of different things. Most recently, I believe, CTV's The Social, right?
Yeah, that was last January. It was a good time. Yeah, I rewatched that for the first time recently, actually. I was like, you know what? Damn, I did pretty good.
No, I watched that a couple times, actually. I was like, I learned a couple of things just in that clip alone, right?
Sweet. Love that.
So today we're going to be talking about all sorts of different things, but we're going to really revolve it around aging and more specifically how nutrition can play a role in aging. So I saw a statistic the other day, and as I was actually preparing for today, and it was that 92% of the population of America has one or more vitamin or mineral deficiency. Is that a surprise? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a very, it's not surprising because I know we talked about this prior. And so let's just start by, we'll separate what deficiency is versus what I think most people actually mean when they say deficiency, which is like inadequacy. So deficiency means you're so low in something that you're getting like clinical symptoms, right? So not a lot of people, not 92% of people have a deficiency, but 90% of people have at least one inadequacy, meaning they're getting less than the recommended level of a vitamin or mineral. Right. That doesn't surprise me at all because there's a lot of vitamins and minerals, and you have to eat at a certain level and a certain balance to get what you need for all of them. So the fact that many people could have fall short in at least one, even if most of the time it might be vitamin D, let's say, then fair enough. Yeah, I believe that in all honesty.
Is that really a big deal? Like how when you look at it and when there are so many vitamins and minerals, and with that stat, it's tough to know whether or not to be like, oh, this is a big deal. I need to take more control of my nutrition. Is that something that really plays a huge, huge role in health?
It is a big deal, but the statistic also is like a little bit misleading. So let's dig into it a little bit. So if 92% of people have at least one inadequacy, like I said, vitamin D is very commonly not adequately consumed because it's really only in fish. So it's either fish or supplements really, or a little bit from milk, right? So many people could be inadequate in vitamin D, but otherwise have a great diet. Right. And I'm not saying that's the case, but it could be. But I would say, if you are short in an important nutrient, right, and we'll talk about the ones that are most commonly people fall short in, that's a sign that there's very likely a lack of balance in your diet. And, there's costs for that over time. So it's not like it's a huge deal, like you have to sweat it right in the moment, but bigger picture, it matters because it reflects the balance and quality of your diet.
Right. And with that many people who are short or inadequate in vitamin D, let's just talk, what does vitamin D actually do?
Yeah. Well, vitamin D, it's a big one, right? We're learning pretty much weekly, daily about its roles in the body. I mean, for sure, it's implicated with bone health, with muscle health, with immune health. A lot of studies show that people who have more vitamin D, they have healthier gut bacteria, they have less inflammation, right? And the list goes on and on. If someone's short in vitamin D, let's say they're very low, maybe even deficiency, right? If you resolve that, you could improve conditions like fatty liver, like eczema, and so on. So it definitely matters. But vitamin D is really unique, to be honest, because again, it's really found, it's added to milk, it's added to some products, but the only foods that have a lot are fatty fish, salmon, sardines, trout, mackerel, which people don't eat that often.
Right.
So really, in all honesty, it's very hard, especially in the winter, for the average person to get enough vitamin D without supplementation. It's very, very hard.
Right. And when it comes to getting vitamin D from the sun, what does somebody actually need to do? Just go outside and just sit there? Or how long do they need to sit there for? Or is it, what does that look like when it comes to getting enough vitamin D?
It's a complicated one. I mean, you definitely have to be out without sunscreen in the middle of the day, 10 or 20 minutes. But then there's a lot of layers there, right? As you can appreciate. And different people synthesize it in different ways. So if the best thing you could do is get blood work, see where you're at, to go without supplementation. Some people can get enough levels without supplementation if they eat fish, if they get sun exposure, but then also you balancing that with safe sun exposure. There's a lot of layers there, right? So it's not necessarily, it goes beyond diet in a lot of ways.
Right. Okay. And one of your points that you mentioned a minute or so ago is that vitamin D plays a role in bone health and in joint health as well, or no?
I mean, it plays a role in bone health and muscle health, right? Muscle functionality. So I guess by association, it's not to say that vitamin D is going to fix arthritis or something like that. But I mean, I think it's safe to say that by association, it probably does have a role there too.
Right. And so when it comes to aging, say somebody's in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 60 plus, what are some of the more common inadequacies that you see when you're working with your clientele?
Yeah, well, so statistically speaking, things that people fall short in: magnesium, calcium, vitamin A, potassium, fiber. Those are the big ones. Those are the heavy hitters. Those are the ones that are most important and the most likely. If I pluck an average person off the street, they're the ones that are most likely to be underconsumed.
Right. At least one of them.
At least one of them. Yeah. I mean, again, some things are found, like magnesium is found in certain foods, vitamin A is found in certain foods, but there's overlap. Like leafy greens, for example, are high in magnesium and high in vitamin A, right? So, vegetables, not always widely consumed, depending on the individual, depending on the context.
Right. And why do you think that this inadequacy, that so many people are going through that? Is it something to do with the quality of our food, right? And how it's grown? Or is it something that people just aren't preparing their meals at home? Or what is it?
I think it's two things. I think the first thing is that to be adequate in every vitamin and mineral, you have to have, quite a balanced, robust diet and a decent level of understanding about, what you're doing. It's not easy, right? Just like it's not easy to perform athletics at a high level, it's not necessarily easy to perform nutrition at a high level. It takes time. The second thing is, though, and that's playing a big role, is there's a lot of confusion, in part due to social media, about the role certain foods should be playing. So I'll use magnesium as an example, okay? Magnesium is found mostly in fish, dark chocolate, whole grains.
Love chocolate.
Yeah, I finished mine already. I love dark chocolate. We talk about dark chocolate, a lot of health benefits. Yeah, nuts and seeds and legumes like lentils and chickpeas. Now, you can find someone on social media, influential person, who's going to say something bad about one or more of those food groups. They all have room for controversy in modern nutrition. Not for me. I feel very strongly in my belief that these are very important foods. Right. People who eat these foods are healthier. But if you get too caught up in social media and negative messaging, you may think that these foods are bad or not necessary, or even something like seemingly harmless, like nuts have too many calories or something. If that leads someone to avoid eating nuts, seeds, and avocado, let's say, that's not a good thing. Right. And that's going to open up your risk for being short in potassium, be short in fiber, and short in magnesium. And that's just one example of many.
Right. And that's one of the things that I appreciate about your approach is it's not okay, you can't eat this or don't eat that or whatever. Because like you said, with the social media stuff, you get on social media and you see one person saying, okay, don't eat, I'm just going to throw random food in there. Don't eat, I'm going to say kale. Don't eat kale because that's your thing.
You will find people who say that. Yeah.
But whatever it is, there's always somebody, spewing off something. Okay, you can't eat this food or that food.
Yeah.
So how does somebody go about not necessarily changing the nutrition, but ensuring that they are implementing foods from all these different things? Is it the colors of the vegetables? What is it?
Yeah, no, it's a big question. For me, like some of the food groups that people who eat these food groups more often are more likely going to be in a better position. They're going to cover their nutrients. Something, fruits, vegetables, what people call the healthy fats, nuts, seeds, avocado, legumes, alternative protein sources, like even things like fish or tofu. Because like fish is the only source of vitamin D and the only source of the EPA and DHA, which are like what are the long chain omega-3s, which are probably more beneficial than plant-based ones, although plant-based ones are still good. Right. So those are some food groups people think about. But really, bigger picture, if it's getting customized guidance is helpful because you can do, like even if someone wants to do the keto diet, if they're really compelled to do the keto diet, you can do the keto diet in many different ways. Like you can eat salmon and broccoli and avocado, or you can eat like sausage and, and cheese. And not to say those foods you should never have those foods, but those are both keto, right? But they couldn't be more different. So it really is like if you have dietary restrictions, or let's say you have a more complicated relationship with food and your perceptions of food draw you into like more complicated directions, it makes it more and more important to get, personalized guidance to make sure you're doing things right. Because I always say this to my clients, it's a very hard time to be like an average person figuring out what to eat because of the type of messaging. And part of that is because people are incentivized to say controversial things. Because if they say things that are
views.
Yeah, exactly. More views, more money. If someone says something that's like contrary to the consensus, it's going to get a lot of attention.
Right.
You know,
Right. I'm sure we've all seen the don't eat this or lose 5 pounds with this.
Yeah.
Right.
Kale's poison, oatmeal's poison, blah, like all this stuff. Right. And when you're taking information from people online, you have to try to, it's really tough, but you know, is someone saying something for their best interest or for your best interest?
Right. How do you feel to that?
Yeah, I think part of it is, you know, again, if you're in a position where you can get customized feedback and someone can, you know, translate the information for you more readily. But there are a lot of people, you know, on social media who also break down, especially dietitians like myself, who break down these erroneous claims, right, from other people, you know. So again, you could look for people like that. They'll explain in a certain way. It's not easy. I think I think with all the information online, I think customized, curated guides really is the answer, because how is someone going to figure out what to do? It's not easy, but yeah, I mean, it's a tough one.
Yeah.
It's a very tough one.
You know, I had a lady, one of the ladies that I work with, who told me that she wanted to start doing more of a kind of a meat-only diet.
Sure.
And I think that you and I, we take fairly similar approaches when we're looking at nutrition. You know, same thing, well-rounded, and not saying, okay, this diet or that diet. But going off what you said, where it's social media has made it so confusing, because you know, you get experts in things such as law, who that's their thing, is lawyers. You get people who are in, you know, mechanics, who that's their thing, right? And those people probably aren't experts in other areas, right? So we sometimes look at it and we think, oh, this is easy. But for a lot of people, nutrition can be one of the most confusing and frustrating parts of their lives.
You're right.
So what do you say to somebody who is facing those feelings of confusion and being unsure and being on social media and seeing all these posts? Like, what do you say to them?
Well, yeah, you know what? I think you have to meet someone where they are. And you make a good point, because even for myself, you know, I'm gaining knowledge, high level insight, science. I'm getting that knowledge daily. And every day I get further and further, you know, from, let's say, the average person. So it's important for me to check myself and to be grounded and to understand, like, you know, I might be talking about some fancy topic, but someone's still like, they're just trying to figure out if it's okay to eat carbs. You know what I mean? I think for me, it's about meeting people where they are and taking things on a case-by-case basis. You know, mastery over nutrition is a journey. You're not going to do it, you know, it's going to take trial and error. It's going to take talking things out. It's going to take self-reflection, observation, right? It's going to take being honest with yourself. It's probably, for many people, going to take some level of professional feedback. Doesn't mean you have to see a dietitian once a week for the rest of your life, but hey, you know, if you want to learn how to squat properly, maybe you get a personal training session, and so you can, you know, be safe in the future. Same thing, you know, mastering one's nutrition is, like, in my opinion, like a multi-year endeavor. When you work with someone, or you know, you can condense that timeline. But again, there's so much out there. There's so many scenarios we face, and to understand how to operate, how to feel around all those things, it takes time. There's no easy answers.
Right. And going back to the aging, with somebody who's in their 50s and 60s, I've almost found that some of them take an approach of, oh, well, you know, I'm this age, I kind of know this stuff already. Yeah. Right. So why do you think there's the hesitancy towards, you know, investing in dietitians or personal trainers versus, you know, other areas of their life where, you know, you might go out for dinner and spend a couple $100, but when it comes to investing in your health, there's a little bit of almost a disconnect there.
Yeah, I think, you know, it's a tough one. I think in some ways, like food, you know, it's a very personal thing, you know, in a lot of ways, maybe people don't want to be quote unquote judged on it. They don't want to receive feedback on it. People get set in their ways, set in their habits with age. Like I do to a certain extent in things. And I know my parents are even worse. You know, I can't even convince them to try an air fryer. Right. So again, I mean, I think really, and look, someone will act if they're compelled to act. So if they get a diagnosis, something goes wrong, it's gonna be a much easier decision for them to make. Right. And beyond that, someone like myself, all I can do is I put out there, you know, the value of going down certain paths, choosing certain things. My big thing is to highlight the unique value of certain foods. And, you know, whether or not someone chooses to embrace that or not, or maybe, you know, I think what happens a lot on social, whether it's for you, for me, for someone else, people do take in information. You may never know. They may never comment. They may never tell you. But there's a lot of people who are watching and observing. And I know that because intimately people do tell me, like, hey, you know, I've been following you for years, by the way. I just want to say I've adopted all these changes.
Love that.
So, you know, sometimes you have an influence without knowing it. I think that's important to say as well. You know?
Yeah, for sure. And so we've talked a little bit about the importance of knowledge when it comes to nutrition and going through aging. But one of the things I really want to kind of touch on as well is the cognitive side of aging, right? As we get older, people might be starting to notice more, not necessarily memory loss, but maybe a deficit in being able to hold certain information.
Sure.
So, and same thing, I love using stats. So is that according to the Alzheimer's Society of Canada, almost 40% of us are going to experience some form of memory loss after we turn 65, right?
Yep.
Kind of almost like a normal part of aging, right? Certain things happen. Memory is one that is affected.
Yep.
But is brain health something that can be impacted largely by diet?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Diet plays a huge role. I think I'll give you a great example that's going to tie in some of what we talked about already and kind of bring it together. So, let's talk about foods that people maybe fear or misunderstand. Maybe fruit might be one of them because, fruit contains sugar and sugar really gets people riled up.
Fired up.
Right. It definitely does. And that's a whole other conversation. But so we start with that some people are dissuaded from eating fruit because of the sugar content. And then we look at the science. We talk about cognitive health. Well, there's compounds called flavonoids. Okay. And I talk about them a lot on my page because, again, I'm interested in foods that have stuff that other foods don't. So there's anthocyanins, which are found basically only in berries. And there's things called flavonones, which are found in citrus, like oranges and grapefruit.
Gotcha.
Studies show, right? Recent data shows people who consume more flavonoids have lower subjective cognitive decline, which is a measure of cognitive decline. It's one of the ways that scientists measure it.
Gotcha.
Right? So if someone's afraid of fruit and there's these two compounds which are only found in those foods, they could go without being exposed to those compounds. And there's going to be consequences for that because flavonoids, and I encourage people to Google flavonoids because there's other flavonoid sources. Google them, see which foods have them. Scientists believe that flavonoids, they increase blood flow to the brain, they reduce brain cell inflammation, and they extend brain cell life. Now, it doesn't mean that's 100% confirmed, but that's what they believe based on the best available evidence.
Right.
So you want to talk healthy aging, you want like what they call inflammaging, which is reducing inflammation, right? Because inflammation and aging are associated. Right. You have to have those, you have to know which foods contain those compounds, in my opinion.
Right.
So it's one of many examples.
Right. So when it comes to getting these different substances such as flavonoids and all the other ones that you mentioned, how does somebody optimize their diet to support, a positive cognitive aging?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. I think that let's go back to, I kind of laid out a couple of key food groups, right? I said fish was one.
Okay.
Fruit is one. Vegetables are one. Okay. And it's not earth shattering. I've said that. So then how do you use that information to, figure out healthy aging? Well, for fruits and vegetables, there are certain fruits and vegetables that have unique compounds that aren't found elsewhere. You know what I mean? Like if you want to talk flavonoids, broccoli, onions have a lot of flavonoids. So it's good for you to know that, just like it's good for you to know that oranges and berries have flavonoids. Not to say you're only going to eat those foods, but as you kind of build out your routine and your rotation, you know that these things have unique compounds and you want to prioritize them, right? And try to have them more often or try and have them at all if you aren't. And so filling in those gaps is key. And then you think about fish, okay? Like omega-3s are important for brain health. Like most omega-3s found in the brain. So if I tell you that fish is the only source of EPA and DHA, and if you don't eat fish, which statistically many people don't, perhaps you need to consider supplementing those nutrients, right? So the reason why you have to understand the foods that have compounds that other foods don't is for the obvious reason that you can pursue eating them. But the other reason is if you don't eat them, that you can build a contingency plan or a backup plan to make sure your cognitive and overall health is not being compromised.
Right. So it comes down to planning.
For sure. It's understanding, planning, and then, implementation, which again, it's easier. I appreciate that it's easier said than done. It's not easy. I can tell you that broccoli is great, but how you actually translate that into your daily life, it's not easy. And I get that.
Yeah, right. And I feel like that's one of the things that comes with being a dietitian is understanding some of those barriers and roadblocks that are not just keeping them from getting these certain foods, but the mental side as well.
Yeah, you got to meet someone. Again, yeah, you know this. I mean, you meet someone where they're at. So I could talk about flavonoids all day, but if someone doesn't eat broccoli and onions, we have to go on to plan B, plan C, and see where else we can have maneuverability, right? People, myself and most people are not going to eat things they really don't like. Right. So the more understanding there is of the backup plans, the better position you can put yourself in.
Yeah. I kind of want to kind of ask you a question about one of the other things you mentioned, which was you talked about, taking supplements and stuff like that. So what's your kind of stance on supplements for, when it comes to, again, that cognitive function and aging? Because a lot of people are on the fence about it. They don't know whether to rely on their food or to take supplements. Yeah.
Well, so there's, I guess, maybe three realms of relevance for supplements, right? The first is you don't get enough nutrient from your diet. The nutrient's very important. Like, if you don't supplement, you put yourself in a bad position.
Right.
Like vitamin D is the most obvious one. Omega-3 is up there. Magnesium is a very popular supplement. My opinion, though, is like magnesium should be able to be acquired from a balanced diet, even though a lot of studies show magnesium helps. And by the way, like if someone has an issue for which magnesium supplementation has been demonstrated to help, I won't hesitate to let them know that.
Go for it.
You know, whether that is PCOS, whether that is like pre-diabetes, whether that is just general inflammation, whether that is migraine, whatever. But the reason why magnesium supplements help with that, in part, is because people don't need enough magnesium. It's not because magnesium's special. It's because people don't need enough, because magnesium's a great proxy for the quality of someone's diet, which means to say if you're getting enough magnesium, the chance that your overall diet is good is pretty high.
Oh, really? Interesting. Okay.
Because magnesium is found in it's found in leafy greens, fish, nuts, seeds, and avocado, legumes.
Right. All these foods that you kind of...
whole grains, dark chocolate. Look, unless someone has a very restrictive view on food, it's, the consensus is that these are very beneficial foods. Even though you don't have to eat them all, most people will be healthier for having them. So that's one thing. So anyway, so you have a gap that you have to fill. Okay. That's number one. The second is you have a health concern where the supplement could help. Like the most obvious one could be something like probiotics for IBS, probiotics for fatty liver. Hey, even probiotics for eczema, there's evidence for that. Psyllium fiber for high cholesterol or blood sugar.
Right.
It's not to say this one supplement changes everything, but it could help. It can contribute positively. So you have you don't get enough of it, but specific health concern, or like turmeric for arthritis, if you want to talk joints and so on, right?
Which is actually next, actually.
Yeah. So there you go, right? And then the third one is kind of like, then you get into what we might call the luxury world, where the supplements don't have a lot of evidence, but people might want to give them a go. Lion's mane for cognitive health. Like there's very, very few that I've seen human studies. It's not easy to, because a supplement's only going to do so much.
Right.
So it's not easy to do a study to show that taking lion's mane is going to change everything.
Right.
So I understand that. That's fair enough. So, green tea extracts of the world, random compounds, like, I don't know, not random, but like you can take flavonoids as supplements. You can take an anthocyanin supplement. Like, should you take that though? You know what I mean? It's tough. It's tough because I'm always conflicted as to, on the supplement front, because if you say that this is good, you should take it. There's 50 other things that are good for you that you could take. So where do you draw the line?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
How do you pick and choose?
Yeah. That's why I kind of have that hierarchy.
Yeah. Gotcha. And so you touched on a little bit about the joint health stuff, right? With what was it that you said? You said it with the joint health?
Curcumin, turmeric. Yeah.
Right.
Well, turmeric is the spice. Curcumin is the bioactive compound that's isolated in like a supplement.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's a good transition into talking about how we can use nutrition to help support, joint and muscular health.
Yep.
So one of the questions that even I get quite a bit is, where does protein, where does that fit in terms of both maintaining muscle mass and strength, but more specifically, where does protein play a role as people get older?
Yeah, I mean, there's a recent study came out about protein and healthy aging. No surprise, right? Like, protein is very important. Let's just go through the reasons why, okay?
Yep.
Well, okay, obviously, for the retention of muscle and the potential to build muscle as, responding to physical activity, that's obvious, right? So you need protein for that. Protein also takes the most energy for our body to break down, right? So our body so if we have 100 calories of protein, about 30% of those calories, our body just spends to digest it, whereas it's 10% for carbs and fat.
Right.
And for most people, that's good, because most of us have a challenge where it's easy to intake energy, it's hard to get rid of it, right? Obviously.
Right.
So protein is going to be helpful for that. Protein is also very satiating, okay? So another problem that most people have, they're not adequately satiated after a meal, so they snack.
And satiated meaning?
Full, yeah.
Right,
they're appropriately full after a meal, right?
Good.
So that's absolutely fundamental. And then, okay, you go further. Well, protein also reduces the blood sugar response of a meal, right? So for example, if you add 9 grams of protein to a meal, it meaningfully changes how the meal affects your blood sugar levels. So oatmeal, like let's say you have oatmeal with a sliced banana and peanut butter. That, with a cup of milk or not, is going to lead to a meaningfully different blood sugar response.
Right. And so with people at home, why does that matter? What does blood sugar level have to do with anything?
Yeah, well, I mean, significant spikes in blood sugar after meals is not ideal, because that can promote elevated blood sugar over time. It can promote insulin resistance and so on. And that's associated with like pre-diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and so on.
Right.
Right.
Which we want to avoid.
Of course.
Of course.
Yeah. And not to say that like if you have one meal without protein, it's over. Obviously it's not, right? And that's definitely true. But protein is best used by the body. You've probably seen these studies, like when it's spread out throughout the day. So it's more effective for that reason for muscle building. It's also more effective because if it's spread throughout the day, if you eat multiple times a day, you're going to get that satiation benefit. You're going to get that blood sugar like blunting benefit where it reduces the response. Right. So with protein, it's like, okay, you're getting the right amount, and we can talk about that, but it's also you're getting diversity in your protein intake. That's the big one that people don't respect enough, right? This is a big difference to get all your protein from chicken and beef. Nothing wrong with those things. Statistically, that's where people get it from, but it's another thing to bring fish, seafood, plant-based protein, beans.
Varying it.
Because those foods have unique advantages. Right. Again, you talk things being unique. Those foods have a lot of advantages.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Good. And so as people get older, I found that there's kind of two things that I've noticed as people get older. And it's that they either start gaining weight. Or a lot of times, a lot of older people, when they're getting kind of up in age, they start to lose weight and they're finding it really hard to keep weight on. So where does metabolism fit into the picture in regards to nutrition and kind of being in one situation or the other?
With age, right, a lot of things change. It could be that depending on how we operate, that we could lose muscle mass. We could lose the ability. Like, let me use myself as an example. I can't spend as much energy on a soccer field now as I could 10 years ago. Right? My body's not capable to put in as much work. Right? So in another 10 years, that's going to be true doubly.
You're slowing down, huh?
Yeah, exactly. I'm slowing down. So that means that I have less physical ability to spend energy in a way.
Gotcha.
Right?
Gotcha.
Which means that I have to be doubly sharp in a way with my nutrition to be able to navigate that. That's like, look, that example has flaws. Yes, but it's true. In 20 years, you're not gonna be able to spend as much energy working out unless you like glowed up and you like found yourself and okay, that's
right. But for
the average person.
Yeah.
Right. So your ability to do work decreases. And if your ability to do work decreases, if your muscle mass decreases, you're not as active, that's going to reduce your calorie needs. And if you don't respond to that in the right way, in a strategic way, I mean, eating more protein obviously is one way to do that. Making sure you get enough protein is one way to do that. Then there are consequences. Right.
When does metabolism really start to be affected? Is this something that happens when you're in your 30s, your 40s, your 50s? When do people generally really start to take notice of that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like one example I can give you is this. Like if you go to, this example has limitations, but I think it's useful. If you go to Health Canada, you look at the resources, you look at the average calorie needs, okay? The way they group it is like this: 19 to 30, 30 to 50. I think from there it's like 51 to 70, and then 70 plus. So it's not to say that something that as soon as you turn that age, something falls off a cliff. But on the whole, you could look at those and think, okay, those are somewhat meaningful demarcations.
Right. Big age ranges though, no?
Big age ranges, but but think of it as
it's a slight decline. It's not like you said, not a jumping off a cliff from 31 to 50, right?
Yeah, essentially. Essentially. But honestly, I would say realistically, there's a lot more going on to that because over time, things can creep up. Blood sugar levels can creep up. Blood fats like triglycerides and cholesterol can creep up. Blood pressure can creep up. So something like muscle mass. If you get DEXA scans, you're able to measure your muscle mass. Let's say, like those are things to worry about. Metabolism is like an overused term. I wouldn't have people spend too much time thinking about that per se. I would think about the other stuff that's more tangible to think about, to measure, to affect. And if you affect those things, you're doing well.
Right. And so, especially kind of keeping an eye on any sort of conditions that are coming up. And so, do you recommend somebody is getting blood tests every couple years, every decade? Where does that fall into being overall health?
I think the less confidence they have in their routine, the more they should look into stuff.
Right. For a lot of times, people know if they're doing well or not, right?
Yeah.
Yes and no.
Yes and no. I mean, there's different levels. For me, at this stage of my career, I have not to say that I don't adapt my philosophy to my clients if they have certain parameters. Of course I do. But let's just take someone who's like open eater, no restrictions. Okay. I have a very specific view and philosophy as to what I would want their diet to look like. And even if that individual is well educated and they do okay, there's probably going to be gaps. And I'm going to give you, this is a great example. You want to talk healthy aging, you want to talk lifespan. This is a perfect example that ties it all together. So there's a study in 2022 that was done in the PLOS Medicine Journal. Okay. And what they did is they looked at the dietary habits of the average person and they did some modeling. Like if we change the diet of the average person and have them eat more of a certain food group, which food group is going to give them the most expected life years?
Oh, this is going to be good.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And the two food groups that came up were legumes, lentils, chickpeas, kidney beans, black beans, and nuts.
Really?
Yeah. Not fruits and vegetables, even though they're very important.
Right.
The reason for this is very simple, and it goes right back to the magnesium conversation, that relative to the health benefits of nuts and beans, they're not consumed a lot. People don't understand. They think that beans are automatically bloating and I shouldn't have them. Nuts have too much fat, I shouldn't have them. Or they heard some other nonsense online, right? But nuts and legumes, and we can dig into their unique benefits, but nuts and legumes have characteristics that no other foods have. Right? So you take those out, you're a big deficit.
Right. Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and so again, like if I could tell the average person what to do right today differently, it's
for overall health.
Exactly. Yeah. It's to eat more nuts and legumes. And I'm going to add one more layer to it, because if you talk to a person, talk to a client, you know, and they ask you about your diet, if you say, I eat broccoli once a week, that's my main vegetable, they're going to be like, oh, okay, broccoli once a week. That doesn't sound great. Vegetables are important, right? But if you tell them every Sunday you have lentil soup, and then, you know, on Wednesday you have granola with nuts with your yogurt, they might not think the same way. They might be like, okay, cool. You know, you're getting those foods in. Good for you. The gap is most people look at those foods to be had now and then. My view, my philosophy is we aim for those foods as often as possible.
Right.
That's the biggest gap between what people think about nutrition and what I would want them to do to improve their health, to increase their exposure to nutrients. Because if you have nuts and beans daily, all of a sudden potassium, magnesium, and fiber are no longer a problem.
Right.
All of a sudden cholesterol and blood sugar are going to come down.
Yeah.
All of a sudden your microbiome profile is going to improve.
Right.
You know, so
it has an effect on a lot of different things.
Yeah. Invaluable benefits for that. And again, you talk about satiation. Legumes are the most satiating food because they have the unique combination of protein and fiber. Right. They totally destroy the blood sugar effect in a positive way. You add legumes to white rice, that white rice doesn't cause a big spike in blood sugar anymore. Okay. Changed everything. So.
Okay. Well, thank you, Andy, for joining us today. You definitely shed some light on a lot of interesting topics that I know that a lot of people have different questions about. Like you said, nutrition can be one of the most confusing parts of somebody's life. So we definitely appreciate you being here and shedding your insight on things. For anybody listening at home, if you want to follow along with Andy or if you want to learn from him, he's very active on social media. You can follow him on Instagram at AndyTheRD. And if you found this podcast interesting or if you found it helpful, consider following us around whatever platform you listen to and give us a rating, which helps us grow our show and reach more listeners like you. Till next time, this is The Age and Grace.